All right, let's go ahead and get going here. My name is Morgan Scalzo. I'm the event manager here at Statsig. And thanks for joining us for this virtual meetup, how to build AI products, even if you're not an AI company. We're joined by our Chief of Staff, Sky Schofield, who's going to be going through the framework that we'll be talking about today. And I just wanted to go over a couple housekeeping notes. This is being recorded, so if you want to revisit any of the bits of information that Sky will be talking about today, you'll receive that recording by the end of the week. So keep an eye out for that email. If you have any questions for Sky, please throw them into the chat, and we'll make sure to get to those at the end of the webinar as well. And I'll also put a link to our Slack community. So if you want to talk any more about any of this, we have a great experimentation channel where best practices are shared. So it's a great opportunity to continue the conversation. I think that's it though. I don't have anything else. So I'm going to pass it on over to Sky so we can get going.
Awesome. Thanks, Morgan. So imagine that you're the CEO of a successful documents company. You know it's time to build an AI product. You've read all the hype about generative AI, and maybe your VCs are pushing you to incorporate AI into your products. Where do you start? How do you build a compelling product? This is a question that a lot of startups have encountered, and we felt like Notion was an amazing example of how to do this the right way. And so we put together some materials on how they did it and what we think everyone else can learn from them. For those of you who haven't used Notion's AI, they've embedded a AI product within every component of their application. It was totally native. It rolled out early. It's been quite successful. So we can go ahead and dive in here. We're going through a 5-part framework, and we'll go through step by step using Notion as an example throughout. First off, I want to set a little bit of context on why we think building an AI product today is different. In the past, AI or ML products often looked like search, newsfeed ranking, etc. But today, AI products are different. The model is no longer the core edge. Historically, you'd have a large team of ML or AI engineers who would be designing a better algorithm that you could use behind the scenes. Today, everyone has access to cutting edge models via APIs. And so the model is no longer a substantial edge for a given company. Small improvements in model performance don't mean as much as they used to. Getting a 1% increase in the relevancy in a search algorithm used to be a huge win. But today, most of the meat of an AI application is about getting it in the field and putting it in people's hands. And the AI component of these applications is no longer hidden. It's the star. So you'll see that there's a ton of AI apps where it's no longer a question of, am I dealing with an AI application or am I dealing with either a traditional application or if there's some algorithm hidden behind the scenes. Today, AI is front and center, and we should be excited about putting it in front of customers. So we think the first step to building a compelling AI app is identifying a pain point that generative AI can help fix. And there are a few areas where AI is particularly helpful. Summarization, expansion of an existing idea, translation, converting text to code, or intelligent revision/editing. And these are very general problems that you can solve that are relevant for most applications. And so the trick is thinking, okay, if I have an existing application, I know these are the areas where AI can be useful. How can I line up those areas with the pain points that my customers already feel? And Notion provided a really good example of that. So on the right, you'll see a screenshot from Notion's initial press release about their new AI features. And they identified 4 primary kind of pain points that they felt like their AI solution could solve. One is letting it tackle the first draft. So it's kind of idea generation, spur ideas and creativity, also idea generation, act as your hawk-eyed editor, obviously, post hoc editing, and then summarization, so long document meeting. These are obviously pain points that they knew customers had, and they were very effective at leading with these pain points as kind of the hook to get people involved. And importantly, all of these pain points are embedded in their existing application, and they're something that customers already know and experience. So this leads us to an important point, which is very relevant as we talk about building an AI application if you're not an AI company, which is that your application can actually be more useful than, let's say, like ChatGPT. Why is that? In Notion's case, it's because they could apply more context to the problem than OpenAI. And context in there, and for them, means able to use like preceding sentences or information surrounding the specific AI feature. They could also use embeddings from, let's say, like a vector database or anything else that are a component of their application. User information, so information on that user style or tone, or they could design specific sub-prompting routines to kind of produce the right answer for the specific application that they're building. And importantly, most of the components of an AI application have nothing to do with the AI part of it. It's actually just applying the data that you already have in your product or application and using that as a part of an AI application. So it's an important thing to note that Notion can be uniquely valuable even in a world where ChatGPT exists. Cool. So that's step one, identifying compelling pain points. Step two is building a V1 of your product. And Notion, again, provides a great example of this. So what does it typically take to build a V1 of your product? First, you'll take an out-of-the-box model, accessed via an API and some prompting. You'll pass some variables into that with proprietary information into API calls. And then you'll use toolkits like LangChain to make this easier and iterate over time. And we really like this graphic on the right. So I think what people think typically about an AI app, if they played with the APIs at all, is, oh, it's just a model API call and some model parameters, prompt. So for example, if you're thinking about Notion and you're just starting with a blank sheet, it could be like, call GPT-4, say the user will provide input and you'll complete their thought. And that would be the whole application. But that's not actually what goes into that application. There's obviously is a model API call and model parameters, but there's a ton of other things that Notion incorporated into their initial feature. Context from the app itself, so preceding sentences, following sentences. In Notion's case, we don't know if they used any sort of embeddings from a vector database, but it's totally possible. Non-AI app features, so the UI and the UX are all things that they had to configure, specific user information, session information, and a host of other things. So you can actually create a pretty amazing V1 just with your own data and an off-the-shelf API call. And in Notion's case, the V1 was good, but it wasn't perfect. And the functionality focused on spell check, translation, and summarization, but it's pretty much just an out-of-the-box GPT-3 call. And importantly, they launched before they ironed out all the bugs. One thing that's interesting here is this is from their initial press release video. You can see that they actually make false claims here. So Notion AI is a new artificial intelligence feature from the productivity app. Notion is designed to help you be more productive by understanding your work habits and providing suggestions on how to improve them. That's not true at all. That's not what the app did. That's not what they said in their press release, but they felt like it was good enough and exciting enough to launch anyway. And the reason for that is because it could do some pretty amazing things in the context of their application. For example, translating the snippet describing what their app was for into Japanese, which is something that before this easily available off-the-shelf API, they could not have done that. So I think that they're a great example of building something good enough and launching it. Step three, as you're launching your app, is to use metrics to quantify your success. So Notion, we think must have done this. We don't know for sure, but core metrics you're going to want to track as you begin to iterate. The first and most important is engagement. So if nobody's using your application or your feature within the context of your application, probably wasn't a successful feature to launch. And the way to measure this can literally be, did they click on the feature? Did they start typing? Did they send a response, etc. Second most important is user feedback, both implicit and explicit. So explicit user feedback looks like these thumbs up and thumbs down. You'll see these on many Gen AI apps. Some also can do the smiley face session satisfaction. Some will also, after they produce a response, say like, was this response helpful? So those are all examples of explicit feedback, but probably more important are implicit feedback metrics. So did the user accept the response on the first try? Did they continue to engage with the feature? Were they retained? Did they come back to the feature after they used it once? Are they trying different types of prompts into that feature? So not just summarize this, but help me generate ideas. These are all metrics that you could envision tracking with pretty simple systems. And then the other things you want to track, especially as you move into production, one is cost. So tracking like the number of tokens that you're using for each call, how that varies by customer, and actually translating that into dollars and cents, make sure this isn't too expensive. Latency is very important. So how long does the model take to return a response? Latency is pretty widely known to be a key factor of how satisfied people are with a feature. And so if you're having a model that's driving high latency, that's definitely going to hurt customer engagement and satisfaction. And then finally, you'll want to track overall app success metrics. So again, for your entire application, your entire product, when users are exposed to this new AI feature, does it increase their engagement? Does it increase their retention? Or even in the case of a company like Notion, are they willing to subscribe and pay more for the AI feature? And good metrics are really essential as you're launching these features. You definitely want to ensure that your feature isn't hemorrhaging cash, so you're not spending a ton of money serving API calls that don't actually move metrics in the right way. They're also really helpful for identifying the differences between models, so you can actually make some trade-offs between cost, latency, and performance when you're comparing, say, GPT 3.5 versus GPT 4. And then also allow you to continuously improve your feature as you adjust prompts or other inputs like the context you're using or anything else in your application. Cool. So step 4, once you have built a V1 and come up with some metrics that you use to track success, you should try to launch it as soon as possible. Notion, again, was a great example of this. I think they launched their initial feature in like November, and then they launched a closed beta. So that was an alpha closed beta shortly after that, and then opened it up to the public in March. And their feature got a lot better through that time span. So the closed alpha or beta should be used to capture verbal user feedback, run some initial experiments, comparing model performance or prompt performance within the context of your application, monitor performance, cost, and latency to ensure that it's not costing way more than you'd expect or driving horrible latency for customers. And then also de-risk the new feature with a partial rollout. So you'll be able to see, okay, we exposed 5% of users to this, did this, tank all of our core metrics. And then you can test even more with an open beta, which we assume Notion did as well. So you can randomize entry to this beta to ensure that new users who are exposed to this feature aren't having a worse experience in your overall product. You can even conduct a holdout of new and old users. So tracking the success of new users and as different cohorts come online, how does the way that they engage with the product change? Test different versions across these cohorts, and then also create the best version with persistent experimentation. So by the time you actually release this feature to the public, it should be a lot better. And then finally, you continuously improve your product by experimenting with every input. So once it's in production, the journey of making this product the best it can be it has a long way to go. And Notion, you can see how they've done this because they've changed their UI significantly over the lifespan of their product. The screenshot on the left here is when they first launched in alpha. Screenshot on the right is where it was when we started looking at this a couple weeks ago. And you can see that the prompts that they're using have totally changed for users. They've added new use cases, basically by identifying new pain points. They incorporated a new model, GPT-4, or at least we assume because it was launched around that time. And just overall increase the sophistication. So it shows you that there's a lot that can be done in production. And assuming that you're tracking key metrics, it takes a lot of the risk out of continuous iteration and improvement. So we'll close with one thought. Just as a whole part of this process, online experimentation is essential. Setting up the right metrics at the beginning supports future changes because it removes the risk from tweaking features or models or prompts. You know if it's going to have a bad output. Having these success metrics also gives you the confidence to launch new features because you know you'll be able to see any change and roll back any features that or any components that you change that would tank your core metrics. And especially in the world of AI that we're now living in, a culture of experimentation can lead to massive breakthroughs. Notion's willingness to throw a new AI feature into their existing product really early gave them a huge lead when it comes to building an AI-enabled document software. And other companies still have yet to catch up. So the culture of experimentation that Notion clearly has, it was a huge part of making their launch so successful and getting their feature out the door early. Cool. That's all we have today. I will now take a look at Q&A, but thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Sky. Yeah, we got a couple questions coming in. First one we can address: for an early stage startup trying to incorporate AI into their non-AI product, is there an ideal stage to start? They may not have enough data or context to know exactly where to begin.
Yeah, I think if you're an early stage startup, the risk of incorporating some or launching some new AI feature is pretty low because there's not a lot of users that you're putting at risk already. And so I think that the right answer is as soon as possible. I'm sure that most early stage startups, or if there are any on the call, are already thinking a lot about the way to leverage AI in their product.
Sure. All right, we got one coming in from Jeremy. If most are going to integrate Gen AI into software products, what's the differentiator needed to stand out?
Yeah, Jeremiah, that's a great question. I think the answer is all about proprietary data. So again, if I go back to I think this slide, sorry, this one. It's all about the context that you can bring within your application that other people can't. And so ironically, the moat here is pretty similar to the way that we built moats in any other software product. Like I have a use case that I can solve better for a given customer. They're engaging more and they're giving me proprietary data. And by leveraging that proprietary data, I can solve their problem more effectively. And if they were to go to anyone else, they would have to basically rebuild all that context. So it's really just about applying that context to a problem with AI tools. So an example for us as we've thought about this is customers log events to us for their product, or record metrics within Statsig. So an example for us would be, well, we have this data about their product. What if we could let them query that data in natural language and get synthesized insights from their event logs in a new way? That's something that we could do that another company couldn't, that OpenAI couldn't, because they don't have access to their raw event logs yet. And so it's ideas like that I think will be really powerful as companies continue to build and roll out AI features. And Jeremiah, if you have any follow-up on that, happy to answer in more detail.
Okay, I think we got one more that I'm seeing coming in right now. Any thoughts on how long Notion might have run experiments on their V1 of AI before making improvements?
We don't, just given the timeline, I don't remember exactly when GPT 3.5 Turbo was released, which I think was the big, was kind of a step change in like the chat components of GPT-3. But Notion was pretty early. I mean, it seems pretty clear that they were experimenting with even just basic features using GPT-3 before their launch in November. So yeah, it's hard to say, but they did launch very quickly. And the polish on the feature it was good, but not great. So it seemed like something that they launched really rapidly after kind of the current gen of models became available for public use.
Got it. Thank you. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions come in, so I'll wrap things up here. Thank you, Sky. If anyone has any other questions, I put out the link to our Slack channel into the chat. So if you'd like to talk directly to Sky, you can do that through that channel. We'll also make sure you could follow up. You can reach me at Morgan@Statsig or Sky@Statsig. Pretty simple. If you'd like to talk more about anything that you saw here today. Again, we'll send out this recording, and I also put in a link to the complimentary blog that kind of complements exactly what we were talking about today. So take a look at that as well. You'll get the recording. So hopefully we'll set you up for success as you look at attempting to implement AI into your product moving forward. But Sky, thank you so much for the time. Thank you everyone for joining, and hope you can join us again next month.